Now let's look a little closer at what was achieved today, what remains to be achieved, and where things go from here. There's a lot to digest, but to do that, we're joined by Dr. Jung-yeop, Research Fellow at the Sejong Center, based in Seoul. Dr. Woo, thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's a little bit late, but we appreciate your insights.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, we've got a lot to go through, but let's start with the agreement itself. North Korea reaffirmed its commitment in the Panmunjom Declaration that it will pursue complete denuclearization, and the U.S. promised there would be security guarantees. But in terms of concrete steps to be taken, did they kick the can down the road, or is there something in the agreement there?
I don't think that agreement itself did not contain any detailed information about what U.S. is going to provide to North Korea as a security assurance. And also there is no detailed information about how and when North Korea is going to kick off the process of the denuclearization of North Korea. So I think that the one element that they agreed today is that there's going to be a further negotiation between the U.S. and North Korea, led by the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and his counterpart. So we have to see that what kind of outcome that they can produce in the ensuing negotiation in the future.
Right, we saw Mike Pompeo was sitting there in the front row, and President Trump sort of told him that he still has a lot of work ahead of him. But so if the agreement was lacking in concrete steps to be taken, it was also noticeably lacking a few key words. It said complete denuclearization, but it didn't say verifiable or irreversible, which has been the American mantra over the past several weeks and months, CVID. How important, or maybe not important, is it, do you think, that the VID part was not included?
I think that if two countries agreed to include a part of the how to achieve the denuclearization, they would probably include the word how to denuclearize, which is about the verification and also how to achieve irreversible denuclearization. But it seems like that they don't seem agree to have the goal of denuclearization itself, because if we look at the joint statement carefully, that it does not say that North Korea and the United States agreed on the denuclearization of North Korea. It just said that North Korean leader reaffirmed its commitment to complete denuclearization of Korean Peninsula. So as two countries did not reach to agreement on the denuclearization of North Korea, it's even difficult for them to mention about how to achieve denuclearization. So I think that the further negotiation led by Mike Pompeo will have to discuss about the process and how to achieve the denuclearization. If they succeed in negotiation, then that statement will include all those words missing today.
Do you think those discussions, because they've obviously been happening for many weeks now with Mike Pompeo, with Sung Kim and their counterparts in North Korea, do you think that when Kim Jong-un and President Trump sat down together, that they were actually in negotiations to the last minute themselves?
This is totally my educated guess. I think that Ambassador Sung Kim and his counterpart, Choi Sun-hee, I think prepared maybe 2 or 3 versions of agreement today. One includes the big deal, which means that there are a lot of things that North Korea can provide to the United States about its denuclearization process. But in return, United States is going to provide more security assurance measures, something like opening the representative office in Pyongyang and Washington. Also, there are some measures including easing the sanction measures. But I think North Korea is not ready to accept that kind of deals yet. So that is why they came down to this little bit plain agreement between two countries. So they didn't give up much, but they don't get much from each other. So I think that those working level negotiators have tried to find out what would be accepted by both leaders. So I think they prepared 2 or 3 versions of agreement. And North Korean leader Kim Jong-un this time just picked the plain version of the agreement, which is not which is not that impressive from my viewpoint.
Okay, fair enough. So the plainer version of the agreement, but in terms of the give and take that we've seen in the recent weeks and months, the balance there, some people pointed out in the press conference to President Trump that they were saying that he made concessions to North Korea, and he said, well, actually, North Korea has done a lot of things in, just as recently as this month in terms of demolishing key facilities at the Punggye-ri nuclear test site. Apparently, they agreed to or promised to get rid of a missile test stand, which is where they test ballistic missiles. So what do you think of the balance there between what's been given and what's been taken?
I think that in the initial response to the demolishing of the Punggye-ri nuclear testing site, United States did not mention highly of it, right? So after North Korea demolished its nuclear test site, President Trump just canceled the meeting. So I really don't think that President Trump initially thought highly of it, but now he have to defend himself about the deal. That is why he now thinks that this demolishing the Punggye-ri nuclear testing site is a good one. And also he mentioned that Kim Jong-un is generously agreed to him that he's going to destroy the missile engine test site. But what President Trump mentioned during the press conference today is that he's going to stop the joint military drill between South Korea and the United States. So with the two initial steps taken by North Korea, which includes the destroying the Punggye-ri nuclear site and the missile engine site, I think President Trump gave Chairman Kim the halt of joint military drills between two countries.
Okay, so it was the halting of military drills in return and sort of retroactively claiming the destruction of the Punggye-ri site as a victory for the United States in a way. Okay, well, so about the news of the U.S. and South Korea joint drills, President Trump mentioned that there'll be a new relationship with the Korean Peninsula, not just North Korea, is what he said in the press conference. I don't know if that was a reference to the drills situation, but do you think it was a reference to that? And how has that news been taken here in South Korea? I imagine with a little bit of surprise.
So when a reporter asked President Trump about what kind of specific measures that he can provide to Kim Jong-un as a security assurance, first thing he mentioned is that the U.S. forces in Korea, even though he mentioned that this is not part of the equation this time, but he said that he wanted to bring them back. So I think that very honestly, he told the press that what he wanted and what he could make exchange with North Korea for the denuclearization process. And also he, in the same line that he mentioned about halting the joint military drills, and he said it's very expensive and South Korea is not paying enough. So there's going to be another round of negotiation between South Korea and the United States about the burden sharing and the paying for the military drills. So I think that President Trump ultimately also going to discuss with South Korea about these issues. So I think that President Trump is going to put all those elements at the table with the negotiating with the North Korea. So I think it's going to be some issue between two allies.
Okay, so we're back to that issue again, which is something President Trump has pushed for a long time. And about President Moon, President Trump was asked about how his views of the South Korean president by our very own reporter, Oh Jung-hee. And of course, he is very positive, as he always is, and saying that he's going to call President Moon immediately and stay in close touch. But at the same time, there was this idea that maybe President Moon would go down to Singapore as well, and there might be a second summit or something on the sidelines. Obviously, that didn't happen. Was that three-way get-together a bit of a step too far this time? Maybe it'll come down the road?
if there's any concrete measures were agreed between the United States and North Korea with regard to dissolving North Korea's nuclear problems, then there might be a possibility that South Korean president can join the summit and have some talk about ending the Korean War peacefully. But I think that without having any concrete measures in the direction of denuclearization of North Korea, I think we have to wait more until the time comes. So I think that once U.S. and North Korea starts the negotiation on denuclearization process, then we can see how soon we can meet 3 ways and how soon we can declare the end of war, end of the Korean War.
Right. Okay. Well, everybody's feeling pretty good after this meeting, I think. But is there anything you see coming in the next several months that could throw things off a little bit? You know, sometimes, I mean, North Korea has always demanded that these drills between South Korea and the U.S. Be put to an end. If those don't happen, is there something else that could throw a spanner in the works?
I think that President Trump proactively provide halting the joint military drills to show his goodwill to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un this time. So I think that he expected something in return for his goodwill. So now he says that he's going to stop the joint military drills, and he also insinuated that he's thinking of reducing the size of the USFK, and he also mentioned that he's not, even though he said that he mentioned the human rights, but we all can feel that human rights issue will be the problem between United States and North Korea, as long as they can talk about the denuclearization process of North Korea. So I think that President Trump showed generous goodwill to Chairman Kim Jong-un this time. So I think he expected a lot from Kim Jong-un in the coming months. So once the negotiation between two countries will begin, then I think that the United States is going to demand many things from North Korea about the initial measures that should be taken by North Korea, such as nuclear warheads, nuclear materials should be taken out from North Korea, and also the dismantling the elements of ICBMs. So I think there's going to be a lot of demand from the United States to North Korea, because President Trump believed that he already showed a goodwill to North Korea. So I think if North Korea does not meet the expectation from the President Trump, then I think it is possible that President Trump suddenly change his attitude toward Kim Jong-un and North Korea.
Sure, and one of those initial demands, I would expect, one that would come sooner than some other demands, would be getting inspectors into North Korea, who haven't been there since, 2009? And we had the Punggye-ri site demolition, but no inspectors there, only journalists. So at some point, probably rather soon, they're going to want to have international inspectors in there, and that could be one of those issues that stirs the pot, so to speak.
So one of the missing part of the agreement today is that they don't have timeline for the negotiation for the denuclearization process of North Korea. When Iran and the international community made the agreement for the JCPOA, it takes they have set a deadline for the negotiation, for 6 months. So they have to make a outcome result when the 6 months deadline comes up. But this time, United States and North Korea did not set up the deadline for the negotiation, so it can take very long. So even in the JCPOA negotiation between Iran and the international community, even though they set up a 6 months as a deadline, it took 20 months for them to reach an agreement finally. So I think that it will take much longer time, because North Korea has much developed nuclear program than Iran.
Sure.
And North Korea already has produced the nuclear weapons, and Iran did not. So I think it is realistic to expect that we have to see much longer negotiation between the United States and North Korea. So I think that inspection and inspection and the verification process will come after the negotiation. So I think that unless North Korea is really willing to give up its nuclear weapons, we are going to see a very, very long process of negotiation between two countries.
And that'll be partly the proof of the sincerity with which both sides have come to the table on these issues. Let's talk about some other countries in the region. China, of course, would be happy to see its close neighbor free of nuclear weapons. It would also prefer not to have the U.S. excuse me, bringing over strategic assets or having the powerful radar system that's part of THAAD, things like that. Do you think China, well, they've said they're happy with this. What's their role going forward?
I think that China probably knows that the U.S. policy of maximum pressure is not going to continue as strongly as before. So I think that if China wants to peacefully achieve the denuclearization of North Korea, they have to remember what President Trump said during the press conference today, that the sanctions will remain intact until the denuclearization process is done. So if North Korea is not cooperative of U.S. goodwill this time, then President Trump might get back to the previous position, which is about maximum pressure and raising the military tensions on Korean Peninsula, which is not welcomed by China. So I think that if China does not want this process go back to the December 2017, then I think China needs to put pressure on North Korea to reach the process of the denuclearization.
All right, and there was one other small question, one remark that President Trump made, which was that he doesn't really care about the academic issue of which parties are required to sign a peace treaty. But are there difficulties there? Does China have to be involved in that peace process, or is he right? They can just, as long as they get together and agree in principle, it doesn't really matter who signs it?
From the pure legal perspective, it does not matter who signed the peace treaty. And for the declaration of the end of war, it even does not care who declared it. So if North Korea and the United States agree to declare to the end of war, it's totally fine, even without South Korea. But to declare, the purpose of declaration of end of war is to get political validity. So without South Korea, it's difficult to raise the political validity. That's why we have to be in the center of discussion on the declaration of end of war and the peace treaty.
Okay, well, Professor, we're getting word that Kim Jong-un could possibly be getting ready to exit the St. Regis Hotel. We've got cameras on the site. Let's take a look there. Okay, we'll go there again if he does indeed appear. Now, speaking of Japan, you touched on an issue of human rights, and it seems like that might not have been a very high priority at this summit, but President Trump said he did talk about it, and that he also talked about the abductee issue. How is Japan going to approach that if maybe they didn't feel that? I mean, it wasn't in the statement. It wasn't talked about by either leader in their public appearances. Do you think Japan will be satisfied with that?
I think Prime Minister Abe and his government was relieved to hear that President Trump mentioned the abductee issues during the summit with Kim Jong-un. However, as the level of discussion on denuclearization is not as deep as we expected, it is natural that the abductee issues didn't go that further either. So I think the Japanese government would be a little bit relieved to hear what President Trump say about the abductee issues this time, because for Japan, it's enough for them to hear that that issue was discussed during the two leaders this time.
So perhaps if progress is made on the denuclearization issue, then the abductee issue will be a much smaller problem, much easier to make progress on. Okay, well, going back to the first moment when President Trump and Chairman Kim met this morning. Was there anything you noticed about their interactions in particular? Body language or tone of voice or eye contact, perhaps. I mean, in many ways, this was typical Donald Trump with the pats on the back and everything, but it was an unusual setting for Kim Jong-un.
Considering his President Trump's past behavior with other leaders, I think it looks like he's much more behaving this time with Chairman Kim. And Chairman Kim seems a little bit anxious about his meeting with the President Trump at the first place. But as time goes by, he feels like more relaxed about the atmosphere. And after I see the agreement, I could see why Chairman Kim feel much relieved, because I think he got what he wanted.
Okay, very good. And we did see Kim Jong-un speaking to the foreign press live on television. He did the same thing during the April summit with President Moon. But this is very different from his father, very different from his grandfather. And I mean, even if you look at in his New Year's address when he was wearing the gray suit, the pinstripe suit, do you think he's intentionally opening up and trying to become what the world would consider a normal leader by doing these things?
I think that this is the very rare opportunity for him to go abroad and to meet the U.S. president, which was not presented in the North Korea's history. So I think that he wants to boost his image as a leader of the normal country, because everyone knows that North Korean leader is a dictator and he's cruel in terms of human rights, and he's developing nuclear weapons, which is threatening the world peace. So I think that by showing him in this diplomatic stage, I think it is successful for him to achieve what he wanted at this time, to look as a normal leader of the normal country.
Well, if he is a normal leader, then, as President Trump said they would do, then they'll hold many meetings in the future. President Trump said he would absolutely invite Kim to the White House, and Kim Jong-un has already invited President Trump to Pyongyang as soon as next month. So when do you think that next meeting could be, and where?
I think that it depends on how fast the negotiation between Mike Pompeo and his counterpart will be set up. So depending on the progress of the negotiation about the denuclearization, I think the President Trump indeed can invite North Korean leader to Washington, or he would be willing to visit Pyongyang when they can produce some real outcome out of the negotiation. So I think that it depends on how fast the negotiation can move toward the direction of the denuclearization of North Korea.
Right. Well, in the process up until now, we haven't been able to see very much of, I mean, it's been very opaque. Even today, we still didn't find out much about what issues the discussions are hinging on, what are the real problems that are holding things up. As you say, it's very different from the Iran case in the scale of the problem they're dealing with. But one thing we did hear about is that they could set up an embassy in Pyongyang. Now, it seems like President Trump has said that would have to come after progress in denuclearization.
Yeah, right. So, so he did not mean that he's going to set up the embassy in Pyongyang right away. So he meant that if the denuclearization process is in the direction of irreversible, then he could think of having a U.S. embassy in Pyongyang. So I think that since North Korea did not accept the agreement about how to denuclearize North Korea this time, United States cannot provide the details of security assurances and economic benefits to North Korea this time. So maybe they could discuss privately, but it did not appear on the agreement today.